Ever since humans domesticated grain, or grain domesticated humans, they decided they didn't want to hunt and gather anymore and built settlements. These settlements would have large walls and provide great stability and safety for their occupants. With their basic needs met, they decided they needed higher needs, and these needs were land, loot, and labor. You might ask yourself, to build a settlement, don't you already need land, loot, and labor? Well, yes, you do, but people always want more, and the best way to get more of something was to take it from someone else. The problem is, the people you wanted to take it from also had large walls and labor to fight against you. With all those aspects in mind, this is where siege warfare began. In this series, I'm going to break siege warfare into 3 distinct eras. These eras being the dawn of time or settlements to 332 BC with Alexander the Great. Alexander the Great all the way to the siege where Constantinople fell against the Turks in 1453, and from there on to modern times with sieging with gunpowder. And in this episode, we focus at the beginning, from 332 BC and before. So let's get right into the siege. Siege warfare used to be a lot more mystical and interesting. Cities could be saved or taken by a single person. They also could be brought to deliverance by divine intervention. But then, pesky written records came around and ruined all the fun. In the case of the Assyrian siege on Jerusalem in 720 BC, the prophet Isaiah recounts an angel coming in the night and killing 185,000 Assyrian troops all at once. Now, if you read the Wikipedia article on this, it says that the number might have been transcribed wrong. That was probably only 5,180 troops, but the angel definitely happened. There's also one story about the city of Jericho that was defended by some French peas, and you're not going to believe, but walking around the walls brought the city to its knees. Some hardcore believers walked long enough around the walls of Jericho that those walls came crumbling down. There was also the crazy account of Gilgamesh climbing atop a wall, and upon being seen, the opposing force crumbled to the ground from his radiance. Now, this story could be attributed to the fact that nobody wanted to be the first person to be on the wall, but if Gilgamesh did it and it was this cool, I want to be the first person on the wall. But as written record starts coming around and we get more accurate accounts of what actually happened, all these things seem to disappear. There's no single heroes taking cities, the divine intervention stops, there's no miracles, walls don't crumble to the ground just by walking. Everything seems to be more set in stone, quite literally set in stone. They would write things down in stone, they would carve motifs in stone. Archaeologists will use stone to see what happened on a battlefield. It all comes down to stone. Alright, jumping right into it, I want to talk about being on the attack, the offense, the cool guys. So you find yourself in a foreign land, all because your leader, your king, your ruler decided that he wanted to have more. Living peacefully in his settlement that was already built just isn't enough. He wants to go take someone else's land, loot, and labor for himself. The first thing you're going to do is try to decide if you want to bait the opponent out into a pitched battle or force them to hide behind their walls. If the decision you came to is you want to fight them in the battlefield, you might start by destroying their lands, burning their farms, killing their peasants, doing whatever you can to upset them so that they come out to meet you. Another great tactic would be to insult their ruler, as egos are fragile and small. This could easily get a king to march outside his walls and try to fight for his honor. If the defense doesn't want to meet you in battle, or you decided you want to lock them in the city, the next thing you're going to do is build walls around their walls to block all access to the city. With these walls in place, the next thing you're going to do is diplomacize. You're going to talk to the defender saying, hey, I won't kill you. I won't burn down your entire city and take everything you have as long as you agree to my terms. When you're attacking, your goal is to take the city, but you want to take the city as easily as possible. Plus, if you're defending your city, you don't want to be starved to death. That's why diplomacy was a win-win for both sides. In the case of the offense, they could take the city without having to burn it down or lose many troops. There was an unspoken agreement back in these days that if you capitulated before the battle began, you would get beneficial terms on the surrender. But once the fighting started, it was fair game for anything. This angle allowed them to lift the rocks and let them crumble to the ground, destroying the walls with great ease. This system was really only effective against mud brick walls, as the mud bricks were lighter and easier to rip apart. Sometimes a direct assault was necessary, as speed played a key factor in siege warfare. Being on the offense wasn't all sunshine and rainbows. Having your troops sit encircle a city for a long time could cause an uprising of itself. And sometimes troops thought they knew better and would try to overthrow their rulers so that they could get to looting the city faster. It was also a logistical nightmare having your troops stationed around a foreign city. When going to attack a city, the defenders oftentimes would burn their farms down to deny you food. Having that many troops in one spot, there was a lot of sewage to deal with. You also needed to balance defense at the homeland and harvesting your crops. If a siege went through winter, you oftentimes had to send troops home in order to plant the fields. And in the fall, you had to send troops home as well to harvest the fields. You might ask yourself, why do the soldiers have to go home and manage the farms? Well, this was before the time of standing armies. Armies were usually raised and lowered as the seasons went by. There was farming season, winter, and war. These were the 3 seasons. They would go, in the spring, you plant the seed. Then, you march to where you're gonna fight. The summer was when the battling happened. Fall would come around, and off you would go, back home to tend the fields again. Winter, usually you had some time off. Another reason why speed was key was because the defenders might have a relieving force on their way to come reinforce the city. I will touch on relieving forces more in the defense section. When it comes to attacking, you might not think that the stakes are as high as defending, and you could argue that, but oftentimes the stakes were just as high. Failing to siege a city oftentimes would result in a revolt, or a lack of credibility in your leadership. Back in ancient times, being a ruler was often a principle of might makes right, and showing weakness was a sure way to get overthrown. But in the end, if you were successful and you took that city, you would get a lot of land, loot, and labor to distribute across your troops and gain a lot of gravitas. So, moving right along to the defensive side of a siege, defense begins long before any enemy troops are even in your lands. You're going to want to choose a place with beneficial geography, like being atop a hill or surrounded by cliffs. Rivers could be beneficial, but they were easily exploitable, as talked about before. They could provide the benefit of clean water that was never ending, but they were also easily poisoned with dead bodies or human feces. After you choose a good location, it is time to build the walls. You want these walls to be as tall and as thick as possible. Just as with offense, on the defense, your first choice is to diplomatize with the attackers. But if the terms are too steep, now the siege begins. The terms were too steep in the aforementioned siege of Potidae in 432 BC. The terms the Athenians wanted was for Potidae to dismantle their walls. Dismantling your walls basically made your city useless when it came to a military aspect. I cannot overstate just how effective walls were back then. There was no good way of directly dealing with them. But having walls would also mean you were a target, because you were a defensible location if someone were to take you over. So if terms were not come to, it was time to rely on your walls for defense. You'd collect all your peasants and troops inside the walls and get ready to dig in and fight a long fight. When the enemy is coming into your lands, any food you're growing, you better harvest and hide behind your walls. That, or burn your fields so they can't steal it. It would kind of suck having to burn down your own farm just because someone's coming who might burn down your farm. Another thing this would accomplish is burning all the usable timber so they couldn't build siege weapons as effectively in the field near your city. So all your troops and peasants are back inside the walls. Now you send envoy to your ally in hopes that they have a force that can come and break the siege and relieve you from the starvation. With your troops and citizens stuck behind the walls, you're going to need to keep them in order. Boredom is going to set in, fear of starvation. Everything is going to try to convince them to do anything other than just sit around and wait. So as a leader, you're going to need to spread propaganda and tell them if you capitulate or show any sign of weakness, you're going to die. Plus, think of all the glory there is if you defend the city from the attacking force. You can tell your ancestors about how you stood fast in the face of death. And plus, if you fail to do this, you're going to lose all your land, loot, and labor yourself. So you might as well defend. As the defenders are being encircled by the enemy troops' walls, they might want to decide to build walls of their own. There's many examples of an ancient form of Tron going on, where the attackers want to blockade the city with walls, and the defenders just build palisades in the way of where the walls need to go. This game of Tron was kind of highlighted in 414 BC, when the Athenians were so inept at the siege of Syracuse, the generals lost track of the stone that they had dug up to build a wall, and it fell into the Syracusan hands. The Syracusans built a wall in front of the wall the Athenians were already building. This wall allowed Syracuse not to be completely encircled. giving a path for the relieving force of the Spartans to come and free the city from the Athenians. In the end, though, if you're surrounded and there's no relieving force, there's no way to diplomatize, there's no angel coming to save you, your best bet is to fight dirty. Use what you have to your advantage, this being your walls and hopefully being up on a hill. This gives your archers further range than the attackers. Also, you could abuse the physics engine of the game. Gravity is your best friend when you can throw rocks down at the attackers. Another dirty tactic you could use is sneaking out at night and burning the attackers' camp while they dream of taking your city. You can get really dirty and empty your chamber pots over your walls and form a sort of septic moat that if they want to come near your walls, they need to get through that. You can hope and pray that some sort of crisis forces them to recall the attacking troops back home to defend their city. But to summarize, sieges were very dynamic. Everything came into play. Geography, the weather, logistics, sewage, your troops, money, diplomacy. Anything you can think of, it came into play when it came to sieges. If you're on the offense, you better be ready to camp. In one example, Nebuchadnezzar took 13 years just to take mainland city of Tyre. He sat out there for 13 years and only took the mainland. The island fortress still stood. As defense, you better have built your city in the right spot and have plenty of food and water on hand, because people can sit outside your city for 13 years. But the truth of the matter is, sieges were long, gruesome business, irregardless if you're on the offense or defense. And that's why most of them came down to diplomacy and coming to a resolution that's beneficial, or at least both sides can live with. In and around 332 BC, in an era where cities took multiple years to fall, one man, Alexander the Great, would revolutionize siege warfare to the point where he was taking multiple cities in 1 year. And that is where we will pick up next time on the next episode of The Siege Captain. We're finally gonna get to discuss siege weapons being used to destroy fortifications. We're gonna get to talk about ballista and catapults and all your favorite heroes like Alexander the Great and historians like Diodorus. We're going to sprinkle a little Julius Caesar on top, some Scipio Africanus. The biggest change we're going to see is in this time period, the favor is going to switch from the defender to the attacker, as sieges are going to happen in record pace. If you made it this far into the video, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Share the video with your friends, and most importantly, siege the day.